Hello everyone, I am doing another deck guide for the Mech Paladin deck, and before I start I just want to say that it might be a little bit muffled and I apologize for that, but I'm trying to not open my mouth too wide or talk too loud because I got my wisdom teeth removed, but it's budget deck day, so I decided to make the deck guide anyway. And so basically, I'm just going to go over this deck and things. There are 3 steps. It's going to be 1, overview of the deck, 2, changes you can make to the deck, and 3, overall win rates of the deck. And there's something special about this week for both the main deck and the budget deck that I'm going to talk about. So, first off, the overview of this deck. You basically get out mechs and you buff them up with magnetization. It's pretty simple. And you have a couple other cards in here that help you gain some kind of pressure, such as what's it called? Oh no, actually they're all mechs. What am I talking about? No, you have a ton of mechs that kind of just all buff each other, and you just try to get as much power out as early as possible with either magnetization or blessing of kings. That's the card I was looking for. Some Fungulmancers, Spellbreaker, and Divine Favor to refill your hand after you've played all your mechs, because when you play the Galvanizer, guess what? All your things get played really quickly and you run out of cards in your hand because you reduce the cost of everything. So, you have the Galvanizer. In case you lose control of the board, you have a quality Consecrate, and then even if your things go down to 1 health, you can buff them all back up. And then you have Rebuke, just against some control matchups because I had an extra slot. And it actually helped against the Mage matchup. I think that the one game that I won a couple games against this, but the one game I won against Big Mage was I rebuked on turn 5, so he couldn't Dragon's Fury, and then I took over the game after that because I was able to get in an extra like 10 damage, so it was actually pretty solid. Upgrades you can make to this deck. Honestly, if you're gonna make an upgrade to this deck, just go the Odd Mech Paladin deck. If you want to stick with the mechs, Odd Paladins are arguably better, but if you want to stick with the mech archetype, go with Odd Mech Paladin. You can just go on Hearthstone Replay and look up Odd Mech Paladin, and that's basically the deck that you should build this on. It has level ups, it has Ziliax, it has Kangor's Endless Army, Nightmare Amalgam because it's everything, Void Rippers to deal with weird boards with large taunts but that have little attack, Vine Cleave. It has all of the works, and it also has things like Glowatron and Bronze Gatekeeper, Mechano Egg, and Borgir as the mechs in the deck that you can magnetize and buff up. And overall is the much better version of this deck. The win rates of this deck are not great. 11 and 22 was the overall ending of this deck. However, that being said, 5 of those games were with a different deck build that I immediately changed, and 1 game I actually had lethal but missed it because I wasn't paying attention. I was trying to be more entertaining and talk to people on the YouTube videos. So this deck is more like 12 and 16, which is still not good, but honestly I think that it could be pretty good, especially in the lower ranks when people misplay a lot, because several games I lost and they had like 2 or 3 health left. And in the lower ranks, if you play well and the other people play poorly, those 2 health and even up to like 5 or 6 health can be made up just by the other people's poor play. And not only that, but the decks are a little bit different, so they won't be as hard board wipes. And honestly, other than that, this deck is just mediocre. I feel like it has potential. I feel like if you run the odd version of this deck, it's a lot better. But as a budget deck in a high rank of about 5 to almost 2, I think I got to rank 3 with like 4 or 5 stars. Played against some rank 2 people. This deck is just a little bit out of its league. However, 1 or 2 more things you could do to buff up the deck is take out a Rebuke and put in a Giggling Inventor, as well as a Spellbreaker, and put in, well, maybe not a Spellbreaker, that's actually pretty important, but the Harvest Golem and the Rebuke to put in Giggling Inventors, because that card is actually in 45% of all decks in Legend. All decks, aggro decks, control decks, mid-range decks, half of the decks in the meta right now are running that card. It's an insanely powerful card, and I don't know why I'm not running it, because if I coined it and then Funglemancer the next turn, I get some pretty beefy minions. On top of that, they're also mechs that you can buff up, so only reason I have Harvest Golem in here is because my turn 3 was really, really weak. The only card I had to play was really the Gatekeeper or Divine Favor, which you usually don't play that early, and Rebuke, which That's actually not a turn 3 play, but that would be another card I get rid of. And this card is situational, but it can be situationally like game winning. But I don't know, Giggling Inventor, 2 Divine Shields, those would live to Dragon's Fury anyway. So honestly, one upgrade that I would make to this deck that might make it better is get rid of the Rebuke, Harvest Golem, and put in 2 Giggling Inventors, because that card is just insane. I actually sent out a tweet, actually me and this guy named Tommy Wave. If you haven't seen him, you should go to his videos, Tommy Wave. He just tries out a ton of decks. He tweeted at Hearthstone Replay for the stats of the deck, because he was like, this card, Giggling Inventor, is a lot like Sludge Belcher, just super stally and kind of oppressive. And they didn't have stats on the Sludge Belcher, but they did have stats on the Giggling Inventor, and it's in 45% of all decks. And that's one of the most played cards, like, all around. So honestly, just throw it in there, to be quite honest. I mean, I don't see why not. It's such a good card. And then let's just go into the overall win rates of the decks and matchups for you. 1, Druid. It says 4 and 6, but this is the game that I threw against. I'd say it's more like a 5 and 5. You have a Silence that can help you deal with things, and your early game is actually pretty solid, so you might be able to take control of the board early on. If you're playing against a Hadronox deck with a ton of large taunts, if you have some pretty big mechs out there, he actually might just use naturalizes on your minions, your large buffed up mechs. And when he uses both of them, his Hadronox is infinitely less powerful, because you can have a Silence in your hand and silence it. Especially considering you can have so much card draw with Divine Favor, you draw it quite a bit. So that's one reason why it wins that matchup. Another reason is because it's just a pretty fast deck in general that can deal with a lot of the other things. It loses to Token. However, I feel like, again, with the Giggling Inventor, Token wouldn't be as big of an issue, because there would be a wall in front of you. Whereas this one, you have maybe an Annoyatron and the, the Bronze Gatekeeper. It's your only taunt, and it can be easily killed. You also have a Quality Consecrate, which deals with large taunt boards. I threw that in there just because, basically to help me in this matchup specifically, as well as Warlock matchups to deal with large zoo boards. But ultimately that didn't really help. I ended up going 0 and 4 against Warlock, but I will get to that in a second. Next matchup is Hunter. Only played 1 match against Hunter, and I think it was pretty close. However, you always need to have a small minion out there and a buffed minion, because if the trap out there is a freeze trap, you need to test out with a small minion first, or you're going to get absolutely wrecked. If you have 1 minion out on the board, you literally can't attack with it, because you can't risk it being freezing trap, unless you're in a position where if you don't, you're going to lose anyway. So I feel like that's a losing matchup for you, but it could be okay against Death Rattle because of how much tempo this deck can gain. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a ton of information on this particular matchup. As for the Druid deck, I think 3 of the losses were on the old deck list. I'm just running back to the Druid deck. So this matchup's actually kind of favored in my opinion against Druid. I feel like it's favored. Against Mage, okay. So against Mage, I would say that because the Rebuke edition, if you use it at the right time on turn 5 so they can't Dragon's Fury or Coin Blizzard or anything, this matchup became a little bit better. And I'm 3 and 2 against it, which is a little surprising, because I feel like tempo is hard for you because of all of the spells. But you do have a True Silver Champion for some way to gain back some life. But honestly, I don't know how this is 3 and 2. I think that the Tempo Mage has too much burn for you to actually deal with. I guess because you have some little dinky minions that you could ping the thing with and then consecrate, considering all their things have 3 health. You can wipe their board fairly easily and then have like a big taunt in the way if you're not able to wipe their entire board. And you're able to do a lot of damage with the mech. So it basically just becomes a face race, and if they have the cards or not. Also, the fact that they have to use turn 6 for a Luneth is not ideal for them and can give you a window of opportunity to close out a game. And then Big Mage, I feel like if I didn't put Rebuke in there, this matchup would be 2-3 because I beat a Big Mage because of Rebuke. Against Paladin, like I said, Odd Paladin and Odd Mech Paladin are just strictly better decks than this. No way around it. The only way you can win is if they go face with their leveled up little Silverhand recruits, and then you Equality Consecrate them in response. Then wipe their board, and then you go face yourself. That's really it. because you're not restricted to the odd archetype. You can actually run those kind of control-y cards. So yeah. Next thing that you can do, actually no, the next deck that we're going to talk about is the Priest deck. Priest is 1-0. Don't fully understand how I won this deck, to be quite honest. I think it's because that, much like Druid, into Priest, Divine Favor can give you such a huge amount of card draw. It's insane. So you can just play your cards, and even if they remove it with 1 or 2, you can Divine Favor, gain all of it back, and you've done damage to them already. And then you can just easily regain a board, especially if you draw a, what's it called, the 2-mana, the Galvanizer, and reduce all of your things cost by 1 anyway. So I see how that matchup could be pretty good for you. And it's the same reason why Druid's pretty good for you, because of all the card draw and the fact that you have responses to big minions. Rogue is 1-5. This is just an aggro deck that out-aggroes you. There's no other way around it. No ifs, ands, or buts about this matchup, especially considering that now Odd Rogues can run Giggling Inventor. Why? Because Giggling Inventor's busted. And honestly, I'd put it in this deck. I'm going to say that over and over and over again. I feel like by putting it in this deck, it would have taken away 2 losses and given me 2 wins and made it like a 50-50 deck just by adding Giggling Inventor. But this deck, it's really, really fast, and if you do manage to get out some big minions and buff them up and actually be in a winning position, Giggling Inventor requires 4 hits, and usually you'll have like 2, maybe 3 buffed up mechs, just in case you want to like spread the wealth around so one thing doesn't get assassinated. With those 3 minions, you actually can't get over the Giggling Inventor play that turn. It's actually nuts. And because of that, even if you are in a winning position, they can turn it around real quick, or just assassinate one of your big minions with the Vile Spine Slayer. And this matchup is just not great. If you ran Giggling Inventor, however, I feel like it could be at least a little bit better, unless they run Blood Knight, in which case you're screwed either way. But if you do run Giggling Inventor, it might be able to stall out for a little bit and allow you to buff up mechs, assuming that some of them actually survive the onslaught of Odd Rogue. And then after that, after the stabilization of the board with Giggling Inventor, you might be able to close it out. Especially considering that those Giggling Inventor, all the minions summoned by it, can actually trade in to the minions he summoned with his Giggling Inventor and get rid of the Divine Shields and stuff. So I feel like the matchup could be better if you had Giggling Inventor, but still definitely a losing matchup. I feel like with Giggling Inventor, it would be like 2-4 rather than 1-5. Shaman 1-2. Don't fully remember how this matchup went, to be honest. I think that against Shudderwock, this deck did pretty well because Lightning Storm couldn't kill all of your stuff at the beginning, and then you were able to close out the game. And even Shaman, just too many little things you have to deal with, and you can't get your board wide enough to deal with all of them. Another thing where Giggling Inventor would be good. Speaking of which, Giggling Inventor like single-handedly beats even Shaman, and I will get into that in my even Shaman guide, but just a quick little blurb from that guide. The even Shaman deck is infinitely worse because of the Giggling Inventor, and until it gets like nerfed or something, it probably won't be very good at higher ranks. It might be good at lower ranks because they try less meta decks, and this deck can really take advantage of that. And I'm talking about the wrong deck now, but I'll get into that tomorrow. But against Shaman in this particular matchup, I'd say it's favored for even Shaman because you don't run Giggling Inventor. But if you did, I feel like this matchup would be 2-1. Warlock, basically just Zoolock. Giggling Inventor would help a ton here. Equality Consecrate I added and at least made the games closer. Like, usually I just get blown out the first 2 games I play, but then when I add Equality Consecrate, at least the games are close, and if things had gone a little bit differently and he didn't have like a buffed up Doomguard in hand, I think I could have won at least 1 or 2 of these games. And then the Warrior matchup being 1-1, same thing as Druid and Priest, ton of cards in hand, you draw a ton, you pressure the board, and then if he wipes it, you can just redraw everything and play everything for a mana cheaper with the Galvanizer, there we go, that's what it's called. Overall, this deck is mediocre. I feel like if you take out the Harvest Golem and the Rebuke and put in 2 Giggling Inventors, and I'll actually put this in the written guide on Hearthstone. Normally, if there are like important changes that I personally would make to the deck, I put it there without any likes required or whatever. So I'll just put it in as part of the guide on Hearthstone. But with Giggling Inventor and taking out those 2 cards, I feel like this deck could be maybe at best average, probably bottom of tier 2, top of tier 3. According to Hearthstone replay, because usually tier 3 is when decks no longer have 50%. I feel like it might be able to push to 50%. As it stands right now, normal Mech Paladin with legendaries is a 47% deck with a tier 3 rating. However, I feel like my deck build's actually pretty good and doesn't rely solely on like some legendaries to win. It has like other methods. Looking at the deck now, I don't like the way that this Mech Paladin deck is built. But that's off topic. Point is, this deck definitely has what it takes to maybe be a 50% win rate deck. I'm not going to say it's going to be a good deck, but I feel like it could be at least bottom of tier 2, top of tier 3, around 50% win rate. And in the lower ranks, it definitely could be a good deck, because not a lot of people know how to deal with big minions. They'll stress out, they won't know what to do, they might just concede. I've played against some people in lower ranking, not necessarily with this one, but if you buff up a giant minion, they'll just concede, when all you need to do against that is destroy it, silence it, or, I don't know, just play a taunt in front of it and stall. I don't know. Lower ranks are crazy, so this deck could definitely abuse some of that. Anyway, that's it for this guide. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm going to put the Giggling Inventor tip in the guide so you all know to put it in. Just so all of you who are looking on Hearthstone and didn't get to this point in the video, you guys know. And for all of you who got to this point in the video and checked Hearthstone, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And honestly, I just enjoy all the support you guys are giving me. Hopefully this video wasn't too low quality because I was kind of muffled due to wisdom teeth surgery, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you made it to the end of this video, thank you very much. See ya.